Emma walked the gray sidewalks of the city, blending into the stream of people hurrying about their lives. The metropolis buzzed like a hive, car horns blaring, snippets of conversations drifting by, the hum of tires on asphalt. Her long black coat cloaked her skin like armor, shielding her from prying eyes. Beneath the fabric hid her tattoos, silent sentinels of her past, revealed to no one. A butterfly on her left shoulder, faded with time, seemed to come alive when streetlights filtered through her thin blouse. An inscription about freedom, etched across her ribs, twisted like a river, while a Hamza eye on her neck, barely visible beneath her collar, seemed to watch the world she kept at arm's length. Each tattoo was a part of her, yet also a barrier, separating her from others. She avoided looking at them, for every glance in the mirror pulled her back to corners of her memory she preferred to lock away. Her days unfolded in the monotonous rhythm of office life. Emma worked as an administrator at a large company, valued for her precision and reserve. Colleagues saw her as calm, slightly aloof, always keeping to herself. Her desk was impeccably organized, folders aligned perfectly, a lone photograph of the sea in a simple frame, no personal trinkets. She smiled just enough to avoid questions, but her dark, deep eyes betrayed a longing no one noticed. Emma had mastered the art of invisibility, fading into the crowd, her tattoos, hidden beneath layers of clothing, the only evidence of the storm within her. Evenings found her returning to a small apartment on the city's outskirts. The walls, painted a cold gray, held a silence she both cherished and feared. Alone, Emma shed her coat, but kept her sweater on, even in the heat, as if the fabric were a final shield between her and the world. She brewed tea, sat by the window, and gazed at the city's lights, trying to drown out thoughts that crept like shadows from her past. Her fingers absent-mindedly brushed her wrist, where a tattoo, a delicate broken branch, lay hidden beneath her sleeve. She'd gotten it at 18, in a defiant burst against a world that ignored her pain. Back then, she believed the ink would give her control, but over the years, she realized it merely mirrored her chaos. That evening, her life shifted with a chance encounter. In a cafe where she stopped for coffee, her eyes met those of a man. His name was James. She learned this later when he approached her table with a smile. Tall, with a hint of stubble and an open gaze, he made Emma feel exposed. He noticed the edge of a tattoo peeking from her sleeve, his eyes sparking with curiosity. He didn't ask about it, but his attention was like a beam of light, piercing her carefully constructed darkness. Her heart tightened, with a mix of attraction and fear. She was used to being unseen, but his gaze seemed to see too much. James began appearing in her life more often. He worked in a nearby office and sometimes visited the same cafe. His presence was gentle, yet persistent, as if he sensed there was more to her reserve. Emma didn't know how to respond. Her tattoos, so carefully concealed, suddenly felt like vulnerabilities. She noticed how his eyes lingered on her neck, where the Hamza eye peeked from beneath her scarf, stirring conflicting emotions. She wanted him to see her, but not too deeply. She feared that if he glimpsed the truth, her mask of strength would crumble, revealing the frightened girl still crying inside. Each of Emma's tattoos was a scream she couldn't voice. The butterfly on her shoulder came after her first attempt to run away from home at 16, a symbol of freedom she never attained. The inscription on her ribs, "I am me," was etched during a moment when she tried to convince herself her existence mattered. The Hamza eye, done at 25, was her attempt to shield herself from a world she felt always betrayed her. These designs weren't mere decorations. They were a map of her pain, inked onto her skin so she could carry it without speaking it aloud. James, unaware of this, saw Emma as a mystery. His interest was genuine, but to her, he was a mirror she feared reflecting her true self. She noticed her body tense when he drew too close, her fingers instinctively tugging at her sleeves to ensure her tattoos stayed hidden. Her fear of being seen clashed with her longing to be noticed, making her withdraw further. She didn't know how to tell him that each line on her skin was not art, but a scar disguised as beauty. She didn't know how to explain that her body had become a canvas for pain she couldn't put into words. That evening, returning home, Emma stood before her mirror for the first time in ages. She rolled up her sleeves and studied her tattoos, trying to see them through James's eyes. Instead, she saw herself, the one hiding behind the ink. Her fingers trembled as they traced the butterfly, and a feeling stirred in her chest, unnamed but profound. It wasn't just fear or longing, but something deeper, a premonition that her carefully built world was about to unravel. James, without knowing it, had become a catalyst, stirring the shadows she'd long kept still. Though she wasn't ready to face them, she sensed the process had already begun. Emma sat in her apartment, staring at the flickering city lights beyond her window, but her thoughts were far from the present. The dark room, lit only by the dim glow of a desk lamp, felt like an extension of her inner world, closed off, cold, and full of shadows. Her encounters with James, his subtle attention, and fleeting glances at her carefully hidden tattoos stirred something she couldn't name. His interest, sincere and free of judgment, was like a key turning in a lock she'd long sealed shut. But instead of relief, it brought unease, pulling her memory back to places she'd rather avoid. The tattoos etched on her skin ceased to be mere drawings. They came alive, whispering stories she'd tried to silence. Her fingers drifted to her wrist, where a delicate tattoo of a broken branch hid beneath her sleeve, inked at 18. It had appeared the night she fled her childhood home, choking on loneliness, where her voice went unheard. She'd stood outside a tattoo parlor, shivering with cold and determination, convinced the ink would grant her control over the chaos within. Now, years later, she saw it not as a symbol of freedom, but a reminder of her fragility. She closed her eyes, and memories surged like waves crashing against rocks. She saw herself as a teenager, trapped in a room with peeling wallpaper, her cries dissolving into indifferent silence. Her parents, consumed by their own troubles, overlooked her pain. Her mother, with her cold gaze, walked away, leaving Emma alone, while her father, perpetually absent, was a mere shadow in her life. The tattoo became her first act of rebellion, but also her first attempt to scream without words. The butterfly on her shoulder came later, at 20, after she tried to leave her hometown, hoping to outrun her past. But the city, like her memories, held her in its grip. The butterfly, chosen for its fragile beauty, was meant to symbolize freedom. But now Emma saw it as an illusion of flight. She hadn't soared. She remained caged by her own making. The inscription on her ribs, "I am me," was carved in a moment of desperation, when she tried to convince herself her existence mattered. She'd gotten it during a dark period, when loneliness grew so heavy she feared it would swallow her. The Hamsa eye on her neck, done at 25, was her attempt to ward off a world she felt always betrayed her. She chose it believing it would deflect evil, but now it seemed a mockery. No amulet could shield her from her inner demons. James, with his warm smile and quiet curiosity, unwittingly forced her to remember. He didn't ask about her tattoos outright. but his glances at the edge of a design peeking from her sleeve felt like questions she couldn't answer. She noticed her body stiffen when he stood too close, her fingers tugging at her collar to hide the Hamsa eye. Her tattoos, once chosen with such resolve, now felt like traitors, exposing her vulnerability. She wanted James to see her as strong, independent, but feared he'd glimpse the truth. The fragile girl still crying inside, unheard. Memories of childhood surfaced more often. She saw herself in the old house, where the smell of damp mingled with her fear. She recalled hiding in her room, clutching a pillow to muffle her tears as her parents argued downstairs. She remembered her mother leaving without a glance, abandoning her to the feeling she wasn't worthy of love. Those memories were like needles piercing her skin, and her tattoos became their echo. Each line, each symbol was an attempt to rewrite her pain, but instead, they anchored it, making it part of her. She'd tried to escape her past, but it lived in her, etched onto her body. James, unaware of her inner turmoil, kept appearing in her life. He invited her on walks, shared his dreams, and his openness unnerved her. She didn't know how to be near someone who didn't demand a mask. His genuine interest made her feel he saw too much. Her tattoos, once her armor, now seemed like cracks in her defenses. She noticed her reactions growing sharp when he got too close, her voice trembling when he asked about her life. She wanted to open up, but the fear of being seen was stronger. One evening, in the cafe where they first met, Emma felt her tattoos stir beneath her skin. James sat across from her, talking about his work, but she barely listened. Her mind was consumed by the butterfly, the branch, the Hamza eye, symbols she wore like scars. She realized her tattoos were not just a cry, but a cage. They gave her the illusion of control, but in truth, they trapped her in the past. James, noticing her distance, fell silent, his gaze settling on her wrist. Emma instinctively pulled her sleeve down, but it was too late. He'd seen. In that moment, she felt her carefully crafted mask begin to crack, revealing the fragility she'd hidden for so long. Emma walked the rain-soaked streets, her coat billowing like a shadow clinging to her body. The city, steeped in the scent of wet asphalt, mirrored her inner world, gray, unstable, full of indistinct shapes. Her encounters with James grew more frequent, and each glance, each fleeting touch of her skin, sparked a storm of contradictions within her. She was drawn to his warmth, his quiet confidence, but that same warmth made her inner walls tremble. Her tattoos, once inked to proclaim her strength to the world, now felt like betraying beacons, exposing her fragility. Emma teetered on the edge of wanting to be seen and fearing her exposed soul would be too heavy for anyone to bear. James didn't press her, but his presence was a mirror reflecting what she'd long avoided. He noticed her tattoos, the butterfly peeking from her blouse's edge, or the inscription on her ribs, revealed when she reached for a coffee cup. His eyes held no judgment, only curiosity, which scared her more than any reproach. She was accustomed to her skin being armor, but under his gaze, it felt paper-thin. Her body, marked with symbols, became a battlefield where her longing for closeness clashed with her fear of exposure. She let him touch her hand, felt the warmth of his fingers, but pulled away, as if his touch could breach the invisible wall hiding her true self. Evenings with James were a strange blend of ease and tension. They strolled through parks, autumn leaves crunching underfoot, or sat in small cafes where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with her anxiety. Emma noticed her reactions becoming unpredictable. She laughed at his jokes one moment, then withdrew when he asked something too personal. Her body reacted faster than her mind. She averted her eyes, tugged at her sleeves, covered her neck where the Hamza eye seemed to glare at her with reproach. She wanted to be open, but each step toward intimacy triggered panic, as if she stood at the edge of a chasm, ready to plunge into her memories. Her nights grew restless. Emma woke from dreams where her tattoos came alive. The butterfly on her shoulder fluttered but couldn't fly, entangled in invisible nets. The inscription on her ribs burned like a brand, reminding her of years spent proving her worth. The Hamza eye watched her, a reminder that no symbol had shielded her from pain. In those dreams, she saw herself as a child in an empty house, her voice drowned in silence. She saw her mother walking away, her father's absence heavier than any presence. These images, which she'd tried to bury under ink, returned like ghosts, demanding to be seen. Emma began to notice her behavior with James growing erratic. She provoked him, asking sharp questions about his life, testing how far he'd go. But when he responded with genuine warmth, she felt her walls crumbling, and it terrified her. She pushed him away, canceling plans at the last minute or answering coldly when he tried to connect. Her tattoos, once symbols of strength, now felt like chains binding her to the past. She wanted James to see her as she presented herself, independent, strong, impenetrable. But his understanding gaze threatened to unravel that illusion. One evening, as they sat on a bench by the river, James brushed her wrist where the broken branch was visible. His fingers lingered on the tattoo, and Emma's body tensed, braced for impact. She pulled her hand away, unable to hide the tremor in her fingers. In that moment, she realized her fear of being seen outweighed her desire to be loved. Her tattoos, worn as armor, had become her vulnerability. They were more than designs. They were a map of her pain. And anyone who looked too long risked seeing the truth she feared to acknowledge. Emma returned home that night, her heart pounding in rhythm with her steps. She caught her reflection in dark shop windows, her tattoos hidden beneath clothing but pulsing like open wounds. She knew she couldn't hide forever, from James, from herself, from her past. The thought of letting him see beyond her masks filled her with dread. She wanted to be strong, but felt her strength dissolving under the weight of her memories. Her tattoos, once chosen to declare her existence, now reminded her she was still a prisoner of the girl who was never heard. Emma stood at the threshold of the tattoo parlor, her fingers gripping her bag's strap as if seeking an anchor. The city's noise faded, drowned by the hum of her thoughts. James's attempts to grow closer, his questions brimming with genuine interest, were dismantling her carefully constructed facade. She felt her armor, the tattoos covering her skin, cracking under the weight of his attention. He saw not just a strong woman, but something fragile she feared acknowledging. This terrified her, driving her back to the familiar pain of the needle, the ink, the control she once sought in tattoos. She decided a new design would silence the chaos James had unwittingly stirred in her soul. Inside the parlor, the air smelled of antiseptic and wax. Emma chose a phoenix sketch, a symbol of rebirth, hoping it would give her strength to start anew. She sat in the chair as the tattooist prepared his tools, her gaze wandering over walls adorned with vibrant designs. But instead of relief, she felt her body tense. The needle touched her skin, and the familiar sharp pain pierced her. She closed her eyes, expecting the ink to quiet her inner noise, as it had before. But this time, the pain offered no solace. Each prick echoed her memories. The abandoned house, her mother's indifferent eyes, the loneliness she'd tried to erase. The phoenix, meant to signify rebirth, now felt like a mockery of her inability to let go of the past. Emma recalled a moment of weakness when she'd told James about the tattoo on her back, an inscription dedicated to the mother who abandoned her. The confession had spilled from her like a cry, and she regretted it instantly. His eyes, filled with empathy, became a mirror reflecting not strength, but vulnerability. She'd accused him of making her feel weak and left, leaving him bewildered. Now, in the parlor, she tried to reclaim control, but the needle only amplified her turmoil. She realized her tattoos, once her armor, had become a cage, locking her in the past. When the tattooist paused, Emma glanced at the half-finished phoenix on her skin. The design was incomplete, and she could go no further. She stood, thanked the artist, and stepped into the street, the cold air stinging her skin. For the first time, she left a tattoo unfinished, and the sense of incompletion mirrored her inner state. She understood she could no longer hide behind ink. Her fear of being seen by James, her anger at him for making her feel, were mere echoes of her old wounds. She walked through the dark streets, her tattoos hidden beneath clothing, no longer symbols of strength, but scars she'd inflicted on herself. Emma sat in the tattoo parlor, her skin burning under the buzzing needle, but the pain was more than physical. The phoenix, meant to be her emblem of rebirth, now felt like a cruel jest. She'd chosen the design hoping it would rewrite her story, but each stab of the needle dragged her back to the past she'd tried to erase. The scent of antiseptic and the dim glow of the lamp created a sense of entrapment, not in the parlor, but in her own soul. Her fingers gripped the chair's armrests as the tattooist worked, but instead of the usual relief, she felt her inner chaos swell. The tattoos, once her way of screaming without words, now seemed like shackles, holding her back from moving forward. The needle's pain mingled with suppressed memories. She saw herself as a child, hiding in a dark room where her voice went unheard. She recalled her mother leaving her in emptiness, and how, as a teenager, she'd first stepped into a tattoo parlor to etch her pain onto her skin. The butterfly, the inscription, the Hamza eye, each was an attempt to control what she couldn't change. But now, under the needle's hum, she realized the ink didn't heal her. It hid her wounds, making them part of her body. The phoenix, traced on her skin, was just another layer of that mask, and the tattoo's pain became a mirror of her inner struggle. Emma closed her eyes, and the past surged with renewed force. She saw herself at 16, running from home to prove she existed. She remembered nights spent alone, when the thought of tattoos making her visible was her only solace. But now, she understood, they hid her from herself. The needle kept piercing her skin, but instead of control, Emma felt her defenses crumbling. She could no longer pretend the ink would save her. Abruptly, she asked the tattooist to stop. The phoenix remained unfinished, its wings trailing off, like her own attempts at rebirth. She left the parlor, feeling exposed, but, for the first time, alive. Outside, the cold wind stung her skin, but Emma didn't pull her sleeves down. She looked at her tattoos, now open to the world, and felt no shame for the first time. She realized her pain wouldn't vanish under layers of ink, but it could be faced head-on. The idea of therapy, long avoided, flickered in her mind like a faint light. Emma knew it would be hard, but the unfinished phoenix on her skin became a symbol not of defeat, but of a beginning. A path where she could learn to speak, not scream through ink. Emma sat in the cozy office of her therapist, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. But for the first time in years, she didn't hide her tattoos. The room, bathed in soft light and the faint scent of lavender, felt foreign yet safe. After leaving the unfinished phoenix tattoo behind in the parlor, Emma had taken a step she once thought impossible. She began to speak of her pain. Each therapy session was like reopening old wounds, but instead of ink, she now used words to express what had been locked inside her body for years. Her tattoos, the butterfly, the inscription, the Hamsa eye, the broken branch, were no longer armor or a cry for help. They had become part of her story, one she was learning to embrace rather than conceal. The city around her pulsed with its usual rhythm, but Emma saw it differently. She no longer blended into the crowd or hid her skin beneath long sleeves. She wore her tattoos openly, letting the breeze brush against them, as if freeing them from the weight of her past. Her steps on the pavement felt lighter, as though she had shed invisible chains. Therapy helped her untangle the memories she had once buried under ink. The loneliness of childhood, her mother's indifference, the emptiness that had consumed her youth. Every word spoken in that quiet office was like the prick of a needle, but instead of pain, it brought relief. Emma was learning to see herself not as a victim, but as someone who had survived. She met James at the cafe where their paths had first crossed. His gaze, still warm but now cautious, reminded her of how far she had come. She shared her journey with him, her therapy, how her tattoos had stopped being scars. She no longer feared his empathy or averted her eyes when he looked at her skin. Their relationship didn't return to what it once was, but a new understanding bloomed between them. Not a romance, but a bond rooted in acceptance. Emma felt her soul begin to breathe more freely than her skin, which had carried her pain for so long. At home, Emma started keeping a journal, translating her inner cries into words. She wrote about the butterfly, no longer a symbol of an unfulfilled flight, and the inscription that reminded her of her right to be herself. The Hamza eye became not a shield, but a testament to her strength. The unfinished phoenix, never completed, stood as a symbol that healing was a process, not a destination. Looking at her tattoos in the mirror, Emma saw not scars, but a story. Complex, painful, but hers. She realized her skin was no longer a cage, but a canvas on which she could write a new chapter of her life.